4x1, girls 800 meter, girls 1600 meter, and the girls 4x400 meter. We also had two individual sectional champions in golf, Aaron Eimers, and in boys tennis, our #1 doubles team. Also, finally, we had our WIAA individual state champions, Felicity Hayde in track and field in the 800 meter, and Evan Zableski in boys swim in his 500-yard freestyle. If you don't mind, those in attendance, have a round of applause for those accomplishments. Now moving through that, I wanted to turn it over to our senior student athletes. First, I wanted to thank them for taking the time on this Tuesday after they became official adults on Sunday, still taking time out to share their experience. Now, these 5 individuals have been here throughout the duration and have been a part of many of the accomplishments that I read off this year, and not only this year, but during their whole time here at SHS. So first of all, I just want to say thank you. We'll go this way. We'll start with Carly here.
Hello. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Hello, I'm Carly Lamro. I'm attending University of Colorado Boulder next year. I played hockey and soccer for 4 years each and played volleyball for 2 years. Throughout the hockey program, it's a co-op, so it involves Whitefish Bay, Nicolay, Shorewood, and DSHA and USM. So I thought how Shorewood was involved in that was really cool. It definitely helped me working with people on and off the ice, and I definitely developed a lot of people skills throughout that. And I know the boys lacrosse team and girls lacrosse team and boys hockey they all have a co-op for their teams too, so I think that's really cool that Shorewood does that. For soccer and hockey, both, I was on varsity for 4 years, and for volleyball, I was on JV for 2 years, and I thought being on JV was a very cool experience because you always had something to work for. So I thought that was a really cool experience, and I think the athletic program did a really good job of giving attention to both varsity and junior varsity, which I think is really important. So our program and athletic department develops over the years to make our athletics stronger. And for the future, I'm not planning on playing any sports in college, but I might do some intramural teams just for fun. Because I don't really want to stop playing sports. George did a really good job of making sure it was always fun. So yeah, I just want to thank the school board for letting me come here, and thank the athletic program for letting this happen and doing a great job.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Evan Zableski, and I've been swimming here for 4 years now. And next year I will be going to Tufts University, where I will be continuing to swim. So over my time here, I've really learned everything. A lot of the stuff I've learned, that isn't academic based, is through swimming. I've learned what it truly means to work hard as an individual, and how to set goals and how to pursue and make tinier goals to be able to work up to your big goal. And that's really what I learned through swimming. Especially through my 4 years, when each year leading up to my senior year, I was getting so close to winning that 500 freestyle, but every year I came up short, so I kept having to work hard and work at something else each year until I was able to eventually do it. Also, I would just like to say that Shorewood does an amazing job of making sure that everyone understands how sports can affect them, and how you should join, or why you should join them, because they're so important often, and what you can learn from them is so valuable. And I also like to say that just without my swimming, I don't think I could have gotten into the school that I did, because without it, I think that I would have just been some other student. But if you can prove that you're such a good student athlete, that's just a whole nother level of just being able to show what you can do at a school. So that's what really swimming has done for me. So thank you.
Hello, my name is Aaron Eimers. I'll be attending University of Tennessee next year. I played 4 sports my freshman, sophomore, and junior year here at SHS, and I played 3 sports this year. Football in the fall, basketball in the winter, and golf in the spring, and baseball in the summer. And all 4 years were unreal. I was able to play and compete on the varsity level all 4 years except for my football year, freshman year. But that was a great learning point, like Carly pointed out earlier, to start at the lower level and work for something at the varsity level. At the University of Tennessee, I am not planning on getting right into any sport for the actual university, but I'm thinking of maybe starting with club golf there and just seeing where that goes. I'll definitely also be playing intramurals and competing and enjoying that. Some highlights here, definitely all 4 years, I guess the team goal is to win conference right away, and I wasn't really able to do that freshman, sophomore, junior year, and then this year right away in the fall, we got a new coaching staff, and our football season was spectacular. We had a great senior class, and they finally all came together, and we won the Woodland East, which is something that our co-op, Mesmer Shorewood, we've never done before. So that was amazing, and I'm hoping that it continues in the future. Then I took the winter off, didn't play basketball, but I just wanted a little free time. I wanted to spend some time with my friends and finish off senior year strong. And in the spring, baseball got moved into the spring, so I decided to play both golf and baseball because I couldn't miss out on either of them. And our golf team, we had 7 seniors, and that was the entire program. So we got to get some recruiting for next year. But all 7 of us are great friends, and a lot of them, I'd say 3 of them had never really played before. So we would go out, and coach would provide us, and everyone really wanted to get better, and we ended up taking the Woodland East just like football, and we were able to win conference, which has never been done before either. And baseball season was a little tougher this year, but we're really, really young, and we had a new whole new coaching staff as well. So all 4 years here have been amazing. The sports have been spectacular, and I've learned so much from it. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'm Isaiah. I played football and I did track, more specifically I threw. I'll be going to Aurora University in Illinois this coming fall to play football. Maybe do track. But all four years has been a great time, especially with football. Every single year I strive to do better, whether it be spending all day after school in the weight room, sometimes alone, just to say that I can be better than that upperclassman, or to prove myself and show that I'm varsity level. And we ended up sweeping our conference this year and winning our conference. Too bad we didn't get to go further in the playoffs, but it's been a really good experience. I've learned a lot. Hoping that I'll learn even more as I go to college. My name is Jeremiah Conte. I ran track and field for all 4 years, and then I ran cross country my senior year. First time ever running a 5K ever, and boy was that fun. I didn't really think I could do it, and when I finally joined and I did it, I was so proud of myself, and I learned valuable lessons through cross country, and that's like running is like a real big mental game, and so it's a lot of different things. and like as long as like you can get over like those mental challenges, then like you can do a lot more than what you believe you can. And then also, and then track, and as well, like that mental barrier is like I always have to beat the person beside me in hurdles and in like the lane next to me, just overall. For track, my freshman year I ran just about every single sprint event, unfortunately including the 400. And I did almost all the field events besides high jump, long jump, and triple jump. But I pole vaulted. I threw disc and shot when they needed me. Don't know why, but even there, I learned a lot of leadership goals and traits that brought me into my junior and senior year. More my senior year, showing the new freshmen and sophomores like you really gotta work for something if you really want it, and bringing like a real competitive background towards like a lot of the freshmen. When I look back at it now, I'm proud to say that like I was there when they like went to state, or like I was there when like they got that PR. Just them keeping a competitive mind state was something like I was proud to see. But for next year, I'm gonna be going to William Penn University in Oskaloosa, Iowa. Don't know what in the world's in Iowa, but we're gonna be
Aaron knows. Aaron knows.
I'll be running track there as well, and just making a way in a new environment and just making do. So yeah.
Thank you again to our student athletes for coming. If we can have one more round of applause for them all. And thank
I just out of curiosity, first of all, thank you, and I got to witness some of your amazing feats on the court and read about your feats elsewhere. Last week I got to hear from Jeremiah about this amazing project you did through the Image and Word class. And I'm wondering, and if you don't have an answer, that's completely natural. I changed majors 9 times when I was an undergrad, my first couple of years. Have you thought about what you might want to pursue academically?
I'm going in undecided, so I don't have an answer for that.
That was me.
I'm going to be studying mechanical engineering with a minor in management engineering, and then I might minor in German. I kind of want to speak it. It's kind of interesting.
Das finde ich toll.
I'm planning on studying biomedical engineering.
I'll be going in exercise science and pre-physical therapy, and I might minor in finance. I'll be going for education and either history or political science, and then photography as well, like sharpening the skills that I already have. So
Great.
Fantastic.
Don't forget Shorewood when you're ready to start looking for work.
Well, you all are incredibly impressive, and know that you are way ahead of the game when you get to college in terms of your time management skills and your understanding of how important it is to stay healthy. So good job and good luck.
Yeah, thank you guys, and congratulations on graduating and the future.
Thanks for coming.
We'll have to have you come
see us
back, yeah.
whenever.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, LeVar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so up next is our first opportunity for public comments. Can you just state your name and address?
My name is Patrick Tyrell. I'm now a resident of Milwaukee. I used to live here in Shorewood. I taught at the intermediate school from 1971 through 2001. I'm here in support of Mrs. Zarin. I cannot believe that the stress that she must be undergoing at this time, since there has been no decision as to her employment status for for this year or next school year. It's my understanding that she is under administrative suspension, and I understand the board cannot speak about that right now, but I would hope that a resolution would be forthcoming very soon.
Thank you. All right, there'll be other opportunities for public comment later, if people are so moved. Next up is district operations, an update on facilities.
Yes, just wanted to provide an update. The district management team met last Tuesday. The discussion followed up, focused on the follow-up from the staff user groups that we had conducted with each one of the staffs at the end of the school year, mostly looking at the renovated areas, and that would be staff that would be affected by those groups. So Bob Morris from EUA was taking feedback from staff on the revisions in the designs, taking that feedback. So he'll be working on that over the summer, and then we'll be back the last week in August with staff to follow up on those revisions that were asked for by staff members. Also conducted a follow-up conversation with some Atwater staff members to refine the classroom discussions around increasing square footage in classrooms by addressing their coat closets. So that was part of one of the solutions that was designated as an area of interest, and so we had some conversations about that with some Atwater teachers, able to get down to maybe two design options that Bob was going to take back and do some further design on, come up with some cost estimates, see what the cost impact of that was, and then we'll follow up with the teachers again in August. So working through some of the nuances of the design program. The principals are going to hold walkthroughs of the maintenance items with their head custodians, with EUA and Myron, in late June and early July. So that's going to be around the designations of the maintenance areas. So for example, in some cases there was a designation for 40% of the ceiling tiles to be replaced. So EUA and Myron need to know like which 40%. So walking around to be able to designate those areas, we're in that space right now to get some specifics in those areas. So again, those will take place in late June, late June and early July, with the principals and the head custodians. And then today, actually I put next Tuesday on here, I guess today, Hillary and Paru and I met with EUA and Myron to talk about the community design workshop. We'll probably talk about that a little bit later also, but that's scheduled for next Tuesday, June 18th from 6 to 8 p.m. This will be a chance for community members to provide feedback on the values of the renovated spaces and some of the historical nature of some of our buildings, and to be able to give feedback as part of the design process. So really important that we have that feedback now as we're developing the designs. As we get to next August, September, and October, we'll start to put together the bidding documents, and then it becomes much more difficult to be able to change course at that point. So we encourage all members of the community to attend. So that's the facilities update.
Can I ask, the coat closets at Atwater, are they looking at eliminating them or just making them smaller, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Both.
So one or the other.
Yeah, well, so we're looking at multiple
Or something.
options. So I think the spirit of it was to capture more square footage. And so the designs that we're looking at would be either the full elimination of the wall that would be in the coat closet, and how do we account for storage space, or just the reduction of that wall to an extent that might be able to preserve some of the storage in that space, but also open up kind of lines of sight. So you could have some small groups go back in those spaces and still be able to have some accountability for students that are back there. So those are some of the designs that we had looked at with staff. So got them down to 2. Bob's going to price those out, and we'll come back to those in August.
Great.
Yep.
Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you. All right, superintendent's action agenda, so I will take a motion to approve results 2.2.
So moved.
Second? Seconded. Thank you. Tim Joynt and Nate Schultz are here to provide some
Home core boards.
boards.
just kind of looking at the report itself, this is, our 2.2 is the second point of our academic mastery piece, and uses a heavy amount of our passages presentations, which again this year we're in year 2. So this was 6th grade only. Again, next year we'll be looking at 8th grade and 6th grade. So they'll kind of bolster our next table of information. And so what I did provide you is just kind of the news article that came that explains passages a little bit more if you're a little bit unfamiliar. But it's also important to note that when we're looking at passages, and if you participate in the passages, what we're looking at is academic growth, character growth, high quality work, and kind of just the presentation overall. So when we look at this report and utilizing kind of the board subpoints underneath 2.2, what we're really doing is looking at the high quality work portion and the presentation portion, which apply directly to those 4 subpoints in that first gray box. So what we do in order to provide this report is we take those 2 scores, average them together, and then look for anything that averages below a 2. And so what you have provided below in that table is the percentage of students that received an average of those 2 scores that was below a 2, which we would consider a developing, sort of beginning, developing, secure. We assign those a 1, 2, 3. And so one of the things that we want to note is 2 things. One, I don't know if I would say it was a significant drop, but there was a drop in scores. And one of the things we attribute that to is we're actually getting used to the actual idea of passages. Last year we headed into passages with kind of a, boy, this is going to be really fun. We're excited about it. We're not really sure what it's going to turn out to be. We're pretty sure what it's going to be, but what is actually going to happen. This year we had a lot of our passage panelists coming in for a second year. So expectations were kind of like, oh, this is what I remember seeing. So it's natural that we might see a little bit more of a dip as our expectations kind of figure out where they're supposed to be. And so again, not saying that we saw huge dips, but we did see a slightly lower percentage. We do follow up with those students and their teachers to talk about why are we there and what can we do. Some will actually redo their passage presentation with Mr. Schultz and some teachers to get that score back up to a developing or a secure, because we do want our students to be at that level before they move on to SIS. The other noted change this year, and this is kind of something that I want to show you before we get too far into Tim Joint's academic monitoring of all things. I added a 5-year target as opposed to an annual target. And so with that, you'll notice it's a little bit more generic. So it doesn't, I applied the 95% all throughout. I didn't necessarily look at, okay, so here's the specific N within that subgroup. If we look at next year, we'd like to increase a certain number of N, therefore we should see this certain amount of increase. This was more of like, all right, looking across, we'd like to see about a 95% without any gaps across the board. So I switched that goal to a 5-year target, which was something we had talked about in past years. So that's kind of a sample of what that would look like. And again, that's just kind of hopefully a point of discussion for the board to say, ooh, I think we like that better, or let's go back to the 1-year target setting as well.
Thanks. Any questions? So I have a question about and I think, I know that for the community participants, there's an orientation and video that they can watch if they don't make the orientation. But there's also teachers in that space, right, SIS teachers. Are they also oriented on the rubric?
Yes. So last year, the first year, I did heavier training with the entire staff together, and then this year, I touched base with their new staff members, and then also created a video for them. And so they receive that, and all the information ahead of time, and the video that kind of walks them through everything, and then support for me if they have any questions before they begin. Yeah.
Okay.
Important to note that Nate had to go solo on the community training and just nailed it. It was actually way better than when I was on it, so it's offensive.
No, and I asked because as somebody who's done it 2 years and then also had different people as my panelists, like my co-graders or whatever, it's interesting because I do think people come in with really different understandings of what And I don't know, you know, like you mentioned that you've had some conversations with people kind of maybe like more informally, but it might, I'm just curious if there's like a formal process that you're considering or you do to evaluate and get feedback on the rubric, the process at all from members.
So one of the things that we heard more this year, because last year, again, the first time around, I was
Right.
like, yeah, that worked, okay, we're good. And then now this year, there were a lot more of those informal about specifically the rubric. And so I put it in my notes for next year when we kind of begin the passages process in February, March is kind of when we've started with the 6th grade team to really spend some time to look at, is this really clarifying exactly what we want to get out of it? And so there were several panelists that have, like you, have been doing it 2 years now and thought, wait, this isn't really what we should be giving feedback on. And so yes, I guess. So is the short answer to that. That there are some things I think at this point that we'll look at and possibly tweak in certain aspects of the rubric. Yeah.
And a lot of the feedback that we got last year was about the structure of the passages, and that's a lot of what we
Sure.
made slight modifications to. So we did provide a few additional substitute teachers at each site, so more teachers could attend passages, as well as this year we actually collected if parents were going to be coming to their child's passage, so that we could make sure that as best we could get an adult in every student's classroom, so that everyone felt that support of school, family, and that sense of belongingness. So a lot of the feedback that we took and then made some modifications to really were structural this year. And then this year we took a little bit more of the actual content and what that might look like. So, yep.
I was really concerned when the students presented about their passages and just talking to parents kind of in the mix of the passages about their mental health and stress levels, and they mentioned that. Oh, I think all of them mentioned that when they came to present at the last meeting. I'm wondering, and I didn't see it in the reflections for next year, how we appropriately set the expectation of these. Part of me was glad to hear that it went better than they thought, and you know, most of the kids that in the day that I was in, you know, they clearly were nervous beforehand, and then were like, oh, that wasn't, yeah, I did it, and I survived, and I, you know, persevered. But I'm wondering how we manage that stress level, and we don't add to it, because I think hearing some of the comments from people, perhaps it was added to them by teachers and expectations of what was being put on them. So I'm just wondering if you have thought about that at all.
Yes, I have. And I think the way in which I want to think about that is the rollout of how I introduce it to the 6th graders, and then the follow-up from the 6th grade team into explaining what that means. And I think in my conversations when I would check in with 6th graders before and then after, one of the questions that I would ask is, well, was it what you thought it was going to be? And almost everyone I asked was like, no. Like I was picturing like a dark room and like I'm on the stage and it's like, well, you know you're going to be here, and I think it's that building up that expectations, and I think that's where that fear and that anxiety can come from, because it's unknown.
Right.
Like it's completely different and completely new. And so I think my rollout will include a example model video.
Yeah.
And so when they see the student, then they're able to see this is what the student did. And yes, it won't necessarily see they won't necessarily see the panel, and the questions and the feedback aren't there, just because we don't want to record that for our students. I think it's just important to capture the passage piece. But at least showing that, we'll then say, like, this is what you're doing. You're standing in the math room down the hall. You're giving your speech. You can kind of see you're in front of the table. And just kind of hopefully by showing that image, that'll, our hope is that relieve kind of some of that anxiety. There will, I mean, as best we can, obviously.
Right.
But I think that'll be a big help.
Just a suggestion, we have some dramatically oriented kids in this school district who might consider actually doing a mock passage thing with the panel too,
Yeah.
because I think that is a big unknown and can strike fear into a lot of people. Being interrogated by, you know, this group of adults when you're a 6th grader, even no matter how how friendly you say they're gonna be.
Right.
It's still a teacher, you know, an SIS teacher, a community member, whatever that means.
Stranger.
So, yeah, stranger. Yeah. Yeah, so, you know, consider something like that. It shows the friendliness that is actually there in all of the meetings that I've been in. And it's, you know, it is a wonderful thing. I think once they're done, they see the benefit of that. But I do see a lot of them kind of a little bit stunned, you know, that, okay, it's over, that's it, you know. But maybe consider using a little bit of that, you know, we've got the technology, we could just set up a mock one.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, I remember kind of having this thought last year after sitting through them that, maybe some future iteration or when we do 8th or 12th grade, I would love to see at least some kids get an opportunity to, do something other than a presentation. So if they create a work of art, they do some sort of video, they write something that's not a presentation. I have this overriding concern with all of EL, but, you know, and the idea of authentic learning. Like, I understand public presentation skills are important, but I worry about repeatedly privileging kids who are strong at that, and then, you know, I guess then not seeing the strengths of kids who are great at art, who are great at stuff that's, you know, not staring down strangers in a room. So, which is a lot of 6th graders. So, and that I think would go to making it less stressful, like if they were able to choose and plan. I think, you know, as I'm sure you would say, like, it would take a lot more pre-planning to do something like that, right? So you don't want to have them turn into finger painting and that be their passage, because that's not cool. But I would love to see some future iteration just be something other than that oral presentation.
Yeah, and that's kind of when we get into that next steps appendix, that's kind of what we're still trying to figure out. I would just kind of push that within your policy, it does say communicate clearly, be able to write, speak, and present ideas effectively in a variety of media. So we do need to make sure that we're holding true to your expectations, that we do give kids a chance to speak and present their ideas effectively as well. So I just want to make sure that I get all that balance in and meet the board criteria.
I saw that jujitsu, how you just put that back on us.
Go
ahead.
No, I was going to say, I was to echo you know, what's been said. Additionally, I'd like to add that I thought it was great how you spread the wealth in terms of bringing in new administrators and new community members. There was a tinge of jealousy because I wanted to be there more. And I know next year we'll have an opportunity more that expands to 8th, and once it goes all the way through, there's going to be more than enough opportunities. But I thought it was brilliant how you brought in folks from schools of education, from Marquette, from, you know, just you know, school, you know, local elected leaders, just involved folks in a myriad of ways, and you got administrators aside from just, you know, your typical principals involved, and you also were able to get some of the younger age teachers in to see, like, this is what we're preparing students for. So I just wanted to do a tip of the hat to you for bringing in all those people. It's also, frankly, good marketing. You know, it's a good way for us to tout what's being done, especially when you bring in people from, you know, schools of education or elsewhere from other universities or from universities to come in and see what we're doing. I thought that was well done.
This year we also invited SHS teachers where available to come in and actually watch as well, because it did have an impact on SIS as well. So we had SHS, they'll play a bigger role next year as well.
I know you said in the summary that the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Is there anything that, like specifically that teachers, the 6th grade teachers said that will enter into kind of, you know, reflections for next time? I guess I was wondering about timing. I know that 6th grade teachers put in a ton of
that's the feedback that I got, most. I mean, it's a heavy lift for our sixth grade teachers. They do a lot of work, with our students, and it's really important to note that. You know, I think as we continue down, yes, it might get a little bit easier, but you know, that's something that we have to take a look at, is what are some pieces that we need to keep on the fire, and what are some things that we can maybe take off the fire. But I agree with you, like the biggest concern that I hear from our sixth grade teachers are the time and effort. I think they also appreciate being able to see some of the students afterwards, and kind of in a way reap the rewards of the hard work that their students and themselves have kind of put in.
One of the ways in which both buildings have thought about how can we support the sixth grade teachers so not everything is on them for passages, is to begin, what students do during the passage, as you know, is they have that portfolio and they select artifacts, but to begin that reflection process earlier on. And so Atwater actually started it last year, so you have kindergartners and first graders that are reflecting and choosing things that go in there, which will then follow the student all the way up. And so then by the time they get to sixth grade, they've done that before. So they're not completely starting with like, well, here's like my 4 things to choose, not 4, I mean, but here's what I get to choose from now. Now I have to reflect and think about my past growth and write this speech. They'll continue to be part of that, obviously. I mean, the brunt of it is still going to be in sixth grade. But if we can build the reflection skills, and if we can even have just pieces of work that then our students can look at from 3rd, 4th grade, that will help a little bit at least. I mean, that's the hope. That's when we've talked to other schools that have implemented a version of passages, that they found that to be helpful. And so Atwater's kind of started a process last year, like what leadership team talked about that at their retreat a few weeks back, like how can they begin something. And so trying to ease, because that's the biggest piece of feedback that we receive is that time. It's just, and it's that time of year as well.
Right.
And so working with them to figure out what is that amount of time, when's a good time to get started, when do we schedule passages next year, put it on the calendar in the right spot, things like that.
Yeah, because I think for the students too, like, you know, my kid had orchestra
Right.
and a bunch of other things that I attended and don't remember. Our kid. But yeah, there's a lot going on. Yeah.
Well, and I wonder too, you know, my analogy has been to parents and to others that this is like a student-led conference, just a little more amplified. And so I wonder if there's room to kind of start to adapt that rubric when, you know, I know my older daughter's first one was in 3rd grade. So as she prepared her year of reflection for that conference, you know, there's a lot of similarity, and how can we sort of start thinking in, so it's not such a big stretch, because a lot of the skills that they're doing for passages, they're doing in those student-led conferences. And so if there's a way to kind of adapt or, you know, model the rubric and how they do those in similarities, so that by the time they get to 6th grade, it's not like a mind blow of this is what I'm doing. It's more of a gradual, this is what I've done at a conference. This is just, you know, it's moving kind of in a similar way. Because when I said that to a couple parents who I saw outside of school, they were like, wow, that's a really good way to think of it, just in terms of you've already been presenting what you've done. This is just a bit of a bigger stage, and to not just your parents and your teacher. So I don't know if there's a way to kind of start thinking about it in that way.
Yeah,
Because it is something that we already do. We're not reinventing the wheel there.
Right. Yep. Thanks. That's great. Great.
I was just going to say one last thing. I appreciate the 5-year target. I do think when you have scores of 97 and 100, it's going to be hard to not go down a little bit every now and then. And so I think it's helpful to see where we are kind of more on an average and kind of around that target. So I think that's going to be helpful. Again, hard with only a couple years worth of data, but as we keep adding.
Right.
So I appreciate you doing that.
Did you see any difference by school or max single grade or any other, if you looked at it?
So we didn't. We turned around this report in
Right.
3
You just
business
finished
days.
it. No worries, I was just curious.
impressed. So I have not had a chance to really dive into anything other than what was on this report. Yep.
I was just curious.
Yep.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any other comments or questions? No? All right. All in approval? Aye. Motion carries 5-0. All right, and so then next up is kind of just thinking about the addendum that you included for, I think we've already kind of been talking a little bit about next steps, but if you want to kind of walk through what you're thinking.
Yep. So what we've highlighted in the next steps is really thinking next steps for our students. So our 6th graders that completed passes last year, then this year, like where is this experience, how are we building upon this experience? And what does this look like for them as 7th and 8th graders going to SIS? And so we wanted to highlight something that, working with the SIS staff, we began this year and will continue next year, which is the Capstone Experience. And the Capstone Project is, as we wrote in there, it's a 2-year passion project. And this idea came from the SIS teachers, the staff, that went to a local conference last summer and were inspired by, was inspired there by another school in the area that provides students with an opportunity to do their version of a capstone, to select a topic of their choice and do a deep dive into what that means for them and to connect kind of different curricular areas together for that topic. And so this past year, I worked with the SIS staff to think about what does this look like in 7th grade, and then begin to think about what it looks like in 8th grade. And so this spring, which is the board here, kind of gives a brief overview of it. This spring, we began with the Capstone Experience, or the Capstone Project. And so each 7th grader took time to reflect on their learning that they've done. And so they looked back over their experiences in 7th grade. They thought about things that stood out from them from their elementary time. They also reflected on what they enjoy outside of school, things that they do for fun, clubs, activities, sports. They thought about issues in the world that they care about, so social issues or things that bother them, and they may not really know why, but they know it, that it bugs them in some way, so trying to get at that like core beliefs a little bit. And so we spent some time helping them to reflect and think about, what are you about, what are you into? Part of that experience was also the Capstone Fair, so there's pictures of that in the middle, where we invited in more our local community members and organizations to share what they do for our community, and to talk about challenges and problems that they face, whether that's broader challenges, societal problems like homelessness and hunger, or whether that's local things like within my organization, here's something that we struggle with. And so all the 7th graders went around and they met with and talked to all of these different community members to, again, get inspired and think like, wow, that's interesting. I never knew that was something I could do. Or I never heard of this organization, but I'm really, that idea of working towards curbing the plight of homelessness is something that I want to work on. And now I have this community organization that I know is doing it. I just made a connection to that. So over that time, the students were able to, like I said, reflect and choose a topic that they found interesting. And then the rest of our time, we spent 2 days doing this. So that's what the 7th graders did, is for those 2 days. And then they ended those 2 days with determining their topic for their capstone, and then some guiding questions. So beginning research questions about, so what are they going to do? What are they going to dive into a little bit more? As well as then some beginning information about what is a capstone and how can I go about that? Do you want to talk about, I guess, the timeline a little bit then?
Yeah. So from a timeline standpoint, our students have been talking about asking the right questions and learning about question asking in science classes. They've been kind of diving into, what is a capstone project? Can it be what does research look like? What are good research questions? What is good research in social studies? They'll come back and start to ideate different solutions and prototype those and project lead the way in art. They'll talk about data collection and how data can support their solutions and or research in math. And then finally, they'll actually present to an authentic audience, and that'll be helped through by their ELA courses. So what you're noticing is that in lieu of for instance, expedition in every class, which was kind of like this, oh my gosh, my kid's gonna do 7 expeditions in 1 year, like that's anxiety inducing. Instead, it's more, let's work on a capstone and let's make sure that each class is helping you with an aspect of that capstone project, so you understand how all courses are interrelated to each other and how they can help you to get to solutions as you continue to go and find your passions. So our goal is to have them presenting to an authentic audience. That will occur in various media forms. So that could be a letter, that could be a presentation, that could be a video, that could be any of those options. That will then fold into their 8th grade passage presentation. And again, we're working with our 8th grade teachers on what exactly are those passage presentations going to look like. Are they going to look similar to 6th grade? Probably more than likely they're going to look a little bit different, but then using that capstone piece kind of within those passage presentations to talk about reflection on that capstone process.
Yeah, so this work was inspired by kind of what we've been learning with design thinking, and specifically the launch cycle, which is something AJ Giuliani and John Spencer have kind of taken that idea of design thinking, which is quite big and complex and difficult to understand, and turned it into a way that can be done by students and that we can work through that process. And so my work has been and will continue to be to research more into that, figure out how that works, and then work as well as with the SIS staff and work with them to think, how does this fit for you? How does this fit within the structures and the systems that we have? What do we need to do to kind of change and modify a little bit to, you know, best meet our student needs? And so we'll be beginning that this summer to think about 8th grade and go from there.
Is the launch cycle like a model for design thinking? Is that correct?
Yeah.
So I was lucky enough to be at the launch of the Capstone Project, and so I want to say you guys did a fantastic job. It was really inspiring. I was like, I mean, I wish we did this kind of stuff when I was in 7th grade. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see what comes out of it. So I know it's an ongoing project, which I think is also, interesting for at least my daughter who's in it, who doesn't think long term about things. So it'll be interesting to think about how she is able to bring this back next year. So, but I think it's great. So I thought that the launch of it was really great. So good job.
I guess that's a question I had, because I know, I think it's normal not to necessarily plan a year in advance when you're in 7th grade, and think about, and necessarily be able to break things into steps, and then also the tendency to kind of do what seems easiest. So, I guess I'm wondering, like, what you've talked about with teachers to be, like, steps to take to make sure the Capstone Project is sort of not shoved to the side until May or April.
Really great question. And that's one of the, so if you, one of the graphics that we also put up there is that little black box, which actually shows a 2-year timeline for how this all rolls out. So for the first 3 quarters, our kids are just reflecting on their learning, which then builds to that ultimate reflection in that spring semester, their 7th grade year, to start talking about, okay, so reflecting on some of your learning, what have you learned that you're really passionate about, and then carry that through in their social studies classes, right? So this is a guided capstone project, not a, you choose a question, great, go figure it out and let us know at the end of your 8th grade year. So each quarter we're trying to build in specific focus within the courses to ensure that we are scaffolding their capstone project all the way up and not letting kids fall way behind.
Or just not doing anything.
Correct.
Yeah.
Did you guys want me to read this too, since I'm the one that can see it?
Could you share some of the questions that students have come up with?
Oh, the questions? No. I mean, now on top of my head. Topics I can share.
Yeah.
So I was able to, I worked with different student groups, and some that stood out to me, one student was researching, is really interested. This was right around the time in which there was the Nipsey Hussle murder, the rapper out in Los Angeles. And so he was very interested, and I'm not sure exactly how the questions landed, so I can tell you about the general topic, but he's very interested in what his perception of that connection between music and violence. And thinking about, like, why does that happen, and what is that? Is there a connection there, and what is that? And so exactly how he landed, I don't know, but that was where, when I left him, that was the topic. Another student that I worked with individually, I actually worked with him because he missed a day, so that's the other piece of this, is when they miss a day, then like catching them up. And so we're working through that process, and so I supported him as he missed part of that time, and so working one-on-one with him, we got to the idea that he is interested in mental health and wellness for young people, and it's something that it's in the field that his mom works in, and so he's always kind of found that fascinating, and so that's kind of where he was in kind of that space. And then you have other topics like soccer, and how soccer can be important for community building and for just like the team aspect that comes out of that and the skills that are learned. And so I know one question, a question along the lines of like, how can we create, you know, a space for everyone to play soccer and everyone to have access to youth athletics, because students understand that there's a cost associated and not everyone can, you know, afford that cost. So there were some very inspiring projects that as I was walking around thinking like, I could not have done that as a 7th grader. Like that was really cool to have them see. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, Tim, you stay there.
Okay. Thanks,
I will take a motion for approval of the 2019-2020 Chapter 220 agreement.
Second.
All right, so any updates on this from last year?
It's always a bittersweet topic that we have to bring up. It's a celebration because we get to keep 42 Chapter 220 students. It's a frustration because we can't open up any more seats for Chapter 220 students due to legislation. This is not a decision that we have arrived at. That legislation went away years ago. So just to reiterate, this is not something that we have decided to get rid of. This is something that we are forced to get rid of.
And is that the case for the displaced students as well? Like we couldn't open that up? It's on, I think the first page of the inter-district transfer agreement.
Yeah, yes, I believe so, yes. I think we can only keep the continuing students.
Okay. Do you know what the threshold is that when a district is then not allowed to open up seats? Because Shore apparently has met this threshold of diversity.
I'd have to double check on that.
Okay.
I think like you're actually in for the 220 threshold.
Right.
I think it was 30%.
Okay.
So. All right, any other questions? All right, I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Thanks, Tim.
Yep.
Okay, next up, I will take a motion to approve the preliminary 2019-2020 budget.
So moved.
Second.
All right, so we discussed this at our last meeting. We have Pat Miller here back to answer any further questions, or do you have any updates for us? No. Any further questions from last time?
Nothing changed in the last 2 weeks.
No. We've got a few more folks that we have contracts for, but that hasn't been
A windfall of money hasn't come in?
No big windfalls, no big losses.
Okay, just checking. All right, I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. All right, we'll bring Tim back up one more time. Just when he almost sat down. I will take a motion to approve the North Shore Shared Services Consortium Agreement.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, maybe you guys
Do you wanna
can
take this one, Tim?
describe this one?
I'll take it next year.
The North Shore Shared Services for Consortium Agreement is something that we do every year. It used to be much more popular when we were sharing a lot of special ed services. What the North Shore schools have decided to do is to simply keep recertifying reapproving this consortium. From time to time, there are students who will move from one school to another to take a class that may not be offered. For example, this last year, we actually used this consortium. We had 2 students that wanted to take a Hebrew class that was offered at Nicolay. And so utilizing this consortium agreement, the business manager at Nicolay and I were able to negotiate the cost and get those students enrolled. So typically this is done through either pupil services or curriculum and instruction. When Jeff Saganiak transitioned out, it bounced over to my office, and now that I'm bouncing to New Berlin, I'm bouncing it back over to Tim Jones. So this will be my last North Shore Consortium.
Can I just ask you about what's the transportation arrangement for those two students to get to Nicolay? Is that on them?
Yes.
Similar to if students take classes at UWM?
And you had mentioned the special ed services, so, I mean, do we have students who come here for any services, or?
To my knowledge, no, we don't have any this year.
Okay.
I think, perhaps some of the classes that we offer that other schools don't, that may become popular, I would say, like some of the classes in drama. That could be something that I could potentially see a student wanting to come and take tech theater, something to that effect. But again, the consortium largely it's not used as much as it was in the past, but having it allows us to make those last minute adjustments like we had to do this last year for the students taking it.
That's really what it is part-time open enrollment allows students to go to another school district and take a course, up to 2 courses. This we're gonna use as a pressure valve if it's just not, that part-time open enrollment legislation isn't working for a family and we still want to provide that resource.
Okay. Any additional questions? No? All right, I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Okay, and now I have the superintendent's consent agenda. I'll take a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Welcome to our new teachers and best of luck to Ms. Sims-Gray. All right, we're way ahead of schedule, but public comments number 2.
Hi. Amy Miller, Lakecroft Elementary, 4458 North Lufkin, whatever you'd like. I'm here in listening to your discussion about, I don't have any prepared remarks, I just want to respond to what Nate and Tim shared from the perspective of a 6th grade teacher regarding passages. It was the absolute best 3 days in our classroom of the school year. And they were the best 3 days in our classroom because I can tell you everyone in our class knows who went first and everyone who knows who went last. And the second a student walked back into our classroom, the kids just quietly came around and said, how did it go? Did it go well? And it was everything you'd want in a classroom community. They were there for each other in incredibly positive and supportive ways. The kids who went first were just lifted the others up. I know you're nervous. I know that you're worried right now, but here's what it was like for me. And it just time and time again was absolutely everything you want in that classroom community. I mean, it was Kathleen and I sitting back, kind of like wiping our tears. Gosh, look at this, it's beautiful. And then I think that to hear Nate and Tim talk about the feedback and the rubric, I have to admit that the rubric is kind of something that we maybe don't use as thoroughly as we should, because we do want it to be a bit more authentic. And last year when we were creating it, there were the guidelines and the expectations around the school board expectations. So I'm excited to hear that, you know, maybe it's not working exactly as it's intended for the panelists, because I think that, I don't know how it would change, but it would be really helpful to hear your perspectives as panelists, like what more or what else do you need? And I'm sure Nate and Tim can just bridge that gap for the teachers as well as, for the teachers in order to draft that or revise that, so. That's it, it was great.
That's awesome.
And, well, I guess that's not it. It's super important. I think that it's really valuable. We have students who, had different supports within the room. They had teachers who prompted questions in order for them to be successful for themselves, because to your point, Emily, that people come with all different gifts and talents. And it's our second year, so we knew how to advocate for those students who last year it was brand new, and so with consultation with both Nate and Tim, you know, one of the things we walked away was like, absolutely every child needs someone who loves them and knows them in the room. That was a non-negotiable. And sometimes it was me, and that was great, because families don't have that same flexibility. That's something I would like us to consider, is like conferences, having passages in the evening, so we could have all families have that opportunity. If you look at parent-teacher conferences, those are the times that are most taken. I realize it's one more thing, but to provide that flexibility, I think would be a really great thing. And it's not that, and maybe it's, if you can't do it during the day, we will accommodate you and do it in the evening. So, or on a Saturday. I think that it's important that we should be able to include everyone else. And then finally, to your point, Hillary, our students, when they do their student-led conferences in February, we say, okay, put all of that in that hanging file over there, because that's your passage. So we already are doing that, and kids are like, oh, it's what I just did? I'm like, yep, you have the bones of it. So,
yeah, and if we can get, you know, sort of the younger teachers to kind of think about it in that way, I think that would be great.
Yeah, so, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so some board governance reports. For the facilities referendum update, all I have to share is really kind of teeing off what Brian said about next Tuesday's design workshop. So Hillary and I got to sit through kind of the rehearsal of that today. It's going to be really interesting, I think, for people. There's some really great photos from the Historical Society about our original buildings, an opportunity to see what kind of the different iterations of referendum and additions to the buildings look like, which I think is just helpful in thinking about like what we're doing. And it really is going to be, I think, a really great opportunity for people to voice some of their, what their vision is for what the space feels like and what it might look like. And so if you guys could, I guess I would just ask you guys to reach out kind of independently to individuals you think should be there. Everybody on the FACT has received an email from me. It's on Infinite Campus, it's on Facebook. But if there's other people you know who specifically, you know, you think they would be really a great asset to that conversation, just invite them, because I think it will be a really great opportunity to give some feedback. I don't know if you have anything else to add from today.
No, I think, yeah, I thought that was interesting just to see, you know, there were pictures from the Historical Society, and when we think about, I think sometimes when I think about these buildings and just the different iterations of it, to see those in different time periods is really interesting. And, you know, I think to learn that Lake Bluff was put together in a really hodgepodgey sort of way and have that reinforced on how our buildings have come to be what they are today helps set the stage when you think about the work that we're going to be moving forward in doing. So, I think the kind of framing of how to think about our buildings was really interesting and good.
Great. Okay, and then Emily went to a Shorewood Moving Forward meeting and gave us the meeting minutes. Is there anything you want to highlight, Emily?
Yeah, summary in the report, I think maybe for our consideration, potential future agenda item or community conversation might be had around the N-word and whether a universal ban is in order. There's a lot of support from Shorewood Moving Forward members for that. And so there was some pretty good conversation about how that would work and why they felt that should be in place. My feeling is that if that were to happen, like as a board member, I would want to hear from a lot more stakeholders and certainly a lot more students about that. On its face, I think their argument that there's just certain things that aren't appropriate for school, even if they're, you have civil liberties to walk around, saying whatever you want outside of school. The same way we have a dress code, there could be a language code. So.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if the context was just kind of language in the hallways and classrooms, or was it in literature and things like that as well?
Yeah, so student language basically. So and with the understanding that we already have a policy around hate speech. So there is already a policy in place that says, if you're using that to attack someone, there's already a policy covering that. But then the conversation brought into, well, how often is that policy sort of enforced? What's the punishment for that? But then, and then more broadly, there's a feeling from a lot of parents that were in that room that it's just never appropriate, even if it's with an A at the end and said peer-to-peer, that it's just never okay. So, and that's because we want to create a certain environment in the schools, even if we acknowledge that the word in different iterations is in music and literature and art, that when students speak to each other and certainly faculty, like it's just, so anyway, as I said, I think that's a community conversation maybe we need to have with more stakeholders, but I know it's come up before. It sounded like it came up in the leakage I missed. So continues to be strong interest there. So,
what would be the process for doing such an action? Is that a board action? Is that adopting the?
Is it changing the code of conduct?
Yeah, we would probably want to put it into the start with the student code of conduct. And then look at district policy around that. I mean, compare that with hate speech. I think the parallel that was brought up at the meeting was, a similar movement around the R word. Spread the word to end the word has been a movement amongst students with disability advocates. And so, in my experience, I haven't seen any district policy. It was a little bit more of like raising awareness around that. I haven't seen any policy that would be explicitly like around a specific word, and so we would have to research that. But I would concur with Emily. I think that we should do our due diligence and spend a lot of time around kids and parents to make sure we have a broad perspective of what that would be. Because I know that there's a broad perspective of opinions on that in a lot of places to go. So I wouldn't head there lightly. So and that's not what they were asking, what the group was advocating for anyway. It was just kind of raising awareness around the concern.
Well, and then I think they brought up examples like Brian said. I think there was a middle school student who said, "Well, I signed this paper that said I won't use the R word. Like, why can't we do that for the N word?" I think.
But that was like a school petition. Like that was a school petition, right? Okay.
Right. But I think her point was like that was immediate. It was understood, and she said, "I never heard that word again." Like it was just, basically. I don't want to put words in her mouth, but what sounded to me like you just created a social norm. Like this is how it's going to be. So the question was, why can't we do that in our district? So maybe it's not that easy. But another thing I'd be interested in, Brian, and I should have asked you about this earlier, but but I'd be curious of what other districts have adopted policies around this, and then what, you know, in terms of a blanket.
Yeah, I think it's,
ban.
I mean, we certainly can check. I think it's generally hate speech is where it would be covered. Yeah, and certainly I also want to be clear that we do deem it unacceptable to use the word. So and are talking to students constantly about that. So it's not as if it's just like okay. I think it's just to, you know, there's an ask for the reinforcement of that, and how do we gain more awareness of that. So. Yeah, so, and I think honestly that would be, you know, bringing on student board members at the beginning of next year. It's probably not a bad place to be able to have a conversation with them and be able to explore that area if it's something we want to take a look at.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
There was a couple of other things that I'm going to follow up with Tim Kenny, but nothing for the board to do. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the last item on here, actually, and maybe Amy wants to come back and speak to. We actually have to still work on it. So I think you guys know that Amy, Brian, and I, and Abe Goldberg went to testify at the Joint Finance Committee. And so one of the things that we talked about was that being kind of a starting point for this kind of advocacy work that we could, as a partnership, do. And so Amy forwarded to us I think it was an op-ed that was written by the lacrosse, right? I think superintendent and union principal, or union president.
As a school board member, wasn't it?
Oh, school board member.
School board member and the union president.
Yeah, and trying to do something similar to that. And so I don't know. So we're kind of deciding what we want to do on that. Do you have thoughts on, like, do we want to write something, bless you, something simpler and send it to the JS?
Yeah, I think that there would, so I think there's an opportunity. I read something yesterday that the thought is maybe the budget's not going to be finalized till October. And I think that this biennium process it's always a learning experience for community members, and I think that as a district, we have parents who have the desire and frankly the time to advocate for not only our students, but in this action would be advocating for students across the state. And I think, you know, to personalize the dollar amounts and to similar to what we did at the Joint Finance Committee hearing, but there are specifics, like and I think that it would be valuable to have that discussion, because I think then we would understand kind of our priorities when we look at a budget like this, of just, you know, what are the priorities we want to take forward collectively, and, you know, hear what your priorities are, hear what the administration's priorities are, and teachers. There's going forward tomorrow, allegedly, is new licensure through the DPI that teachers can be licensed to be special ed teachers with no time in the classroom, and, you know, so there are these deep concerns that we have as a profession, as representatives of a profession, but I think that the larger issue for our community is really around the funding structure, what it means to have been promised by certain legislators that, oh yes, we're going to advocate for 60% of special ed funding, and now they've kind of acquiesced to, well, 30 is good enough, isn't it? And I can tell you that our governor told a room full of teachers, no, it's not. And so my desire is to come forward and to model that coming together and communicating with our community. So I don't have anything specific, but I think that, you know, after tomorrow, maybe I would have the mental capacity to do that.
And one of the things that, we talked about before was that, you know, for the, I mean, honestly, for the referendum and getting out the vote, there were like these community groups mobilized around, I mean, advocacy, but also like voting, and that we might be able to tap into like those kind of resources that are already in existence to help with some of this. And I think Amy's right, like I do think people are really interested in knowing more about what's happening with the state budget and how it specifically impacts Shorewood. So I think getting some of those very specific numbers from Patrick about like the impact on Shorewood and then kind of crafting something together, I think would be a good step. But after tomorrow, maybe it'll be a little bit easier.
And I just doing some research about Marta, not throwing shade on Patrick, but Marta has done this kind of work in Rylander, and so she would be, I mean, she's not gonna jump in and say, hey, here's the document, but I think that when we can work together in order to do that, everybody benefits.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. So that was kind of just an information piece for you guys about kind of moving forward what we're gonna be working on.
There was that example of the legislative sort of fact sheet that a district had that I know we saw, it's been a while ago too.
Kettle Moraine, right?
Yeah, the Kettle Moraine had the budget sheet, which I thought was definitely something to copy. But there was and maybe it was Kettle Moraine too, with the legislative sheet that was just a one-pager on different legislative initiatives and how it was going to impact the district. And I think perhaps starting something like that would be interesting because, you know, you read the paper and you know what's sort of happening, or you think you kind of know what's happening, but to have the district say, look, this is how this piece of legislative action is going to impact us, I think holds a different weight. So I'll try and find
that'd be great.
Example.
Okay. Okay, I don't think, well, so when I come up to future agenda items, you guys can tell me about upcoming organization reports. All right, board action agenda, so bring Pat Miller back up here. Oh, and Michelle. All right, I will take a motion to approve a resolution awarding the sale of $40 million of general obligation school improvement bonds, Series 2019.
Is this the sort of action item that we need to state verbatim for the motion?
Yes.
That's what I thought. Okay. I move we approve a resolution awarding the sale of $40 million general obligation school improvement bonds, Series 2019.
Second.
Thank you. Hi, Michelle.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Should I jump right in?
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
go ahead.
Patrick to introduce me or anything?
No, go ahead.
No,
So
no,
Michelle's library's here from PMA with some excellent news for the board and for the taxpayers of Shorewood. So, Michelle, would you like to begin?
I would, great. So Patrick just handed out a summary that I'd like to go through. I'm happy to answer questions as we go along, but it is really, really fantastic news for Shorewood. So I'm pleased to be here to deliver the good message. The first page you see here is just an interest rate summary. This is very similar to what we went through in May when we kind of teed up what this plan was going to be. And I will say that rates have come down even more since we last met. So you can see on this 20-year history of the 20-year interest rate, or the interest rate associated with a 20-year borrowing, that there's really only been one other time in history, or in that 20-year period, that the rate has been lower, and that was in July of 2016. It may have dipped a little bit lower than where we are back in 2012, but we are certainly in an incredibly attractive interest rate environment. I can't say that why we're in an attractive interest rate environment is good news, but for you, for issuing long-term debt, this is great. So that index is down to a 2.14%. When we met in May, just as a point of reference, it was at 2.27%. So it's gone down somewhat even since we last met. So this morning at 10 a.m. we took bids from prospective underwriters and underwriters who would sell bonds to eventual investors. And we took bids from those underwriters on an electronic bidding platform called Muni Auction. And with Muni Auction, a bidder can see what place they're in. They can't see by how much they're losing. They just know they're in second place, third place, fourth place, and they can keep improving their bid up until the bid expiration time, which would, in your case, is 10 a.m. I think the first bid came in at 9:58 a.m., and then it was just like fast and furious and incredibly exciting for people like me to watch. And when a new bidder enters first place in the final 2 minutes, and then each time a new bidder does that thereafter, the auction is extended, and that actually happened 6 times this morning in this sale. So
It's like eBay.
yeah, it is. It is.
Over,
Except, like I
overtime,
said,
eBay overtime.
like I said, they can't see where the other bid is. They just know they're not winning. So they just keep improving their bid in an effort to achieve and maintain the first place position. So we had 9 bidders, or 9 firms, put in a total of 30 bids this morning. And again, the auction was extended 6 times. The winning bidder was Mesero at a true interest rate of a 2.67%. Following the sale, we actually were able to push more principal up, which lowered the rate even more. So the final rate for your approval tonight is at 2.66%. The winning bidder pays all cost of issuance, so that 2.66% is inclusive of all costs. It's really an all-inclusive interest rate. Tremendous. So very, very excited about
Can you
that.
remind us
What
what
were we,
the?
what were we speculating for?
So during,
Try not to use the word speculating.
Sorry.
No, I'm kidding, but we were,
What were we?
we were
thinking?
estimating a 4.25% pre-referendum
yeah,
for this first issue.
the referendum documents were 4.25 to 4.5
Correct.
as we were running.
And so on here, do you have the difference?
I do, yeah. So the next page goes through the issue structure. Are there any questions on like how that bidding works or anything like that before I keep going? The issue structure, again, this is the first phase of the 2019 referendum for a total of $40 million. As we talked about last month, we would anticipate bringing the final $25 million in a couple of years and finishing off what you need for the project. The dated or delivery date when funds are available will be July 1st. This is a 20-year bond issue. You'll make principal payments on April 1st, 2020 through 2039. The first interest payment April 1, 2020. The final 10 years of this debt issue will be callable or eligible for prepayment, either via excess levy funds, as you've done in the past, or via refinancing if you, in fact, find yourself in an interest rate environment even more attractive than today in the future. Your Moody's rating, which I think you should be really proud of, was affirmed as a AA2. So there's 2 rating notches higher than that on Moody's scale, a AAA and a AA1. A AA2 is an exemplary rating. For school districts in Wisconsin, the median rating is a AA3, so you're 1 notch above the median rating. Very positive conversation with Moody's. We were, we being Patrick and I, very clear with them of how big of an undertaking this is for Shorewood in terms of $65 million, and that it is recognized that this is a very long-term facilities plan that you're undertaking, and I think that communication was really key for them understanding taking on the new debt for Shorewood and how it affects the overall, credit outlook. So we were thrilled to maintain that exemplary rating from Moody's.
Sorry to interrupt, but out of curiosity, you shared the median. Do you know what the average, the mean
I
rating
don't.
is?
I don't. I know that primarily you're finding most of the districts falling in that AA2 and AA3 category. Slightly more, I think, in the AA3 than AA2. The winning bidder, as we saw on the previous page, was Mesero at a 2.66 true interest rate. Pre-referendum, we estimated the first issuance to be done at 4.25, the second issuance to be done at 4.5. So if we look at total interest cost pre-referendum for all phases, it was estimated at $34.7 million with a maximum tax impact over the current year of 31 cents. The final, but we asterisk that because we're not done yet, so we're keeping that placeholder for the final $25 million at 4.5%. We're not changing that assumption at all, but using today's interest rate on this borrowing, net of what's called pre-offering premium, which is the bidder today saying we're willing to pay you more than what you need, so that we get higher coupon payments in the future, is 30.7 million, for a difference of almost 4 million of interest cost projected versus what was projected pre-referendum. So that does drive down the mill impact somewhat, a few pennies. We're projecting that the maximum mill rate impact over 2018-19 would be 28 cents versus 31. The financing plan just gives you all of the detail behind that. On the left-hand side, we can see the existing debt and the debt that was paid off at the defeasance that you just approved last month. We see the 40 million that is complete, the final 25 million that we talked about being issued potentially as a kind of a construction loan first, and then refinanced in 2023 with an additional 20-year borrowing. To total debt service and the combined mill rate after not only debt service, but the impact of the second question. I think that was the second question. It's been the operating question. That was number 2 on the ballot, right?
Yep.
The second question on the ballot. So we're looking at the impact of both of those being a maximum impact of 28 cents over today. We see you kind of stepping into it on the debt service. So one thing that we are really cognizant of, and we've worked really hard with administration on, is this in the overall big picture of the tax rate for Shorewood. So we never look at this in a vacuum. We look at this alongside what we think is going to happen with the operating mill rate. We feel really comfortable about where you're at with the lower interest rates, about where debt service is in order to achieve a maximum mill impact when we look at the current mill rate. So at being going from 1388 to no more than 1419, we feel really confident that that is achievable. We're still very conservative with growth in equalized valuation. We're using 0% growth for, I think, the next 7 years in this schedule, and then 0.5% thereafter. So we feel good working with transition as we have that we'll be having in the business office, that we'll be able to kind of familiarize MARTA with everything that we've done in terms of that long-range planning and focus on, that target mill rate in the future. But a 2.66% interest rate sure helps to that end. So.
That's good news. And again, I thank Michelle for her help and her team, and Allison Buchanan and her team at Quarles and Brady. But I also, the foresight that the board has had over the past 5 years, it really helped to put us in the financial position that we're in currently, which gave us the ability to have a referendum ask that far exceeded what anybody in this business or Michelle's business would have anticipated for a school district like Shorewood. And to be able to have the first draw and the majority draw of this $65 million referendum come in with such positive results, I think well, those of you who were at the meeting today, I got this message from Michelle and I came straight in to your meeting because, while the whole process was exciting for Michelle, just getting the email was worth it for me. So actually went into Tim Joint's office and started giving high fives, and they had no idea what was going on. So thank you for having the foresight to do that, having the confidence in my recommendations over the past 5 years, to put us in this position, and let's start getting her done.
Yeah, and I just want to thank Patrick for your service for over the last 5 years in leadership in this situation. So we've certainly seen a lot of improvement out of the business office and the condition of the finances over the last 5 years to be able to get ourselves to this position. So thank you for your leadership in that regard.
You're welcome.
Yes,
Thank you, Patrick.
All right, any other questions? So I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle.
And then Patrick, stay there. I will take a motion to approve the Atwater and Lake Bluff EEC roof replacements.
So moved. Second.
All right, so do you want to talk us through this contract?
Sure. Tony, if you want, I don't know if you want to come up or if you want to just jump in if I need to be saved. The Atwater and Lake Bluff EEC roofs have been in need of full tear-off for many years. Tony and his crew and the consultants that we've been working with for the past 5 years, I think have done an outstanding job at keeping those roofs viable and extending the useful life. However, both Tony and I feel we got extremely lucky this last spring with all the wet, heavy snows that we had no leaks in those two structures. So now that we have some money coming in with a great bond sale, we would like to begin the process by doing the two roofs that were included in the referendum plan. If you remember, when we were going through the referendum planning phases, the roof maintenance on multiple buildings was part of the referendum planning. But what we did with that referendum planning is we just put a placeholder for dollars, and we took the actual management of the roof replacements and the roof repairs out of the scope of Myron and EUA, because the district already works with a consultant group specifically for our roofs. And so we already had a plan for what we needed to do with the roofs on the two EPC buildings. And so as we got closer to this time period, I had Tony start working with commercial consultant, I think it's commercial. Go back there. Commercial consultant group, our roofing consultants, to put together a plan, and that's what I'm bringing to you for approval tonight. Essentially this plan covers OE 6.3, OE 7.5, OE 12.5. What I'm asking for is to replace the roofs. You see the labor, material, engineering, and contingency for an amount not to exceed $388,500.
When would the work begin? Would that happen this summer?
Yes. Yes.
We're ready to go and get it done?
Yes. I actually had just talked to the consultant today. He just popped in because he knew this was my last week.
And then it'll be done before school starts?
Oh, yeah.
Just a general question about this kind of thing, and because there's going to be a lot of bidding going on in the next few years. But so it's clear you take the best cost option from the labor and the materials. What is the consideration of the quality of any of the companies and the
Sure.
Sure. We worked with a different company in the past. With some replacement patches we've done recently, this past year, we switched to a different company, and that happened to be the company that gave us the best bid.
So you have some experience with that particular one?
Experience with them, and I'm quite confident that we'll.
Okay. I guess I'm getting at it.
We didn't do that in the case of the tennis courts because we didn't have that past experience yet with that company. So yes, there is a great deal of thought that goes into that.
So you don't automatically take the lowest bid.
One of the other things that I think is important for you as a board to understand, when the district partnered with this particular roof consultant, one of the things that was very attractive to me is this is not a roof consultant that is in any way, shape, or form connected with a specific company. They're a completely independent roofing consultant, and so what it gives, what this consultant provides to us is knowledge of all of the different companies that would bid on a project in this part of Wisconsin, and what each company's strength is. And so what our consultant is able to bring to us is, Lance, that exact information as to, this is a company that, while they may not have the highest bid, this particular work is in their wheelhouse. And so that's why we chose to partner with this particular roof consultant. I have worked with this consultant in previous districts, and they've done a fantastic job. And I think Tony's been happy working with them so far, so.
That raises something that I had thought about, and I know we haven't come back to the owner's rep conversation, but I believe we need to.
Yes.
But when my day job and my school board job connect, it's always somewhat interesting. And I was at a conference speaking to someone who does sort of similar consulting, owns a consulting company for HVAC systems. And which got me thinking that is there a cost savings by doing some of this work like we did here, by working with a consultant to do the bidding and getting bids to come in, and also to give us a broader idea as like an HVAC, part of what this business owner said was that, you know, she's knowledgeable about all the technology in the HVAC industry, not just what one particular company would offer. And so I'm wondering if there's a cost savings in some of those bigger ticket items in referendum dollars to work with other companies such as the roofing consultant or this HVAC consultant to save money in the long run.
So kind of a contractor that would be specific rather than an owner's rep, which would bid for all of them.
Right.
Okay.
If we look at, you know, the biggest pockets of referendum dollars, is it better to approach it, and could we
Sure.
see a cost savings in approaching it that way versus doing one owner's rep at a significantly higher cost?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that's something that we can explore.
I think that's something that would be worth exploring. I do think that this is a little bit different in that we actually pulled this work out of the scope of Myron and EUA. So the work that's being done on the roofs is not going through those groups, and they have a percentage-based fee for their services in overseeing that. So what we're doing on the roofs, and the reason that we had this conversation and determined to pull those projects out is the roof work can really be done independently of all of the other projects that are being done. So if my concern, and this would be something I would pass on to you, just make sure you're asking the questions about if you're indeed gonna pull some of that work out, is there gonna be any problem in coordinating the interior work when you're doing structural work and wall work and electrical work and HVAC work, you know, to make sure that you're not gonna lose any of that fluidity in that process.
And that's
but I do
something
think it's worth asking the question.
Right, and this business owner in particular, given the HVAC system, said, you know, this is something that we work with the owner, and then we're the, you know, kind of owner's rep, if you will, for all of those other entities that feed into that. And so it just got me thinking that perhaps there's a different way to approach some of those oversight ideas.
Well, and have some of the benefits of an owner's rep without the full, like, overhead that it would cost, yeah.
I think it's definitely a question worth pursuing.
Yeah.
I have a question just more for fellow board members and maybe everybody, but I was trying to think back to any conversation about like the EEC buildings in general, and just trying to remember if there was discussion about like a total tear down and what that would cost and why. I assume that was explored and then, you know, we decided to do this instead, but I'm just curious like what went into that, and if you guys remember why, because people have asked me like, well, why not just tear them down and rebuild them? But so I assume that's come up.
I think the biggest conversation was around connecting it to Atwater.
Oh, okay.
And just cost prohibitive.
Right.
Yeah.
A big part of it.
Yeah, and I think teachers that are in that space like those spaces, they were built for early childhood. Once we would get the roofs on top of them, you know, repaired, which is just something you need to do with any building.
Sure.
It didn't make sense to, like, if we were to tear it down, they would actually like want it built similar.
Right.
Like, you know, like there wasn't any like structural differences
Got
other
it.
than just upgrades to bathrooms and the roofs and like that type of thing. Yeah, I think just from a cost standpoint, it just made the most sense to just make sure that we're maintaining it, and as Hillary had mentioned, you know, just thinking about the connection potentially from Atwater because of its proximity, and that's just something that didn't work out.
Well, just enrollment flows, ebbs and flows, right?
Right.
And how those buildings are used
I was just thinking about
changes.
that, right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, rec department.
I feel like we at one
Right,
point
rec
talked about
department, milestones.
adding a second floor, like as another option, right? But then,
Right.
I mean, all those were kind of got brought back to the teachers and those spaces, and so what, you know, I think that it ended up being that they wanted to keep them.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, so.
Okay, I was just trying to remember, I honestly just.
Yeah.
I was at some of those workshops, but just don't
I
remember.
know,
Okay.
yeah, I'd have to go back and look too. Okay, so I have a motion and a second. Any other further discussion? All right, all in favor? Aye?
Okay.
Motion carries 5-0. Thanks, Patrick. Is this your last board meeting?
Yes, it is.
Is it?
If I can I ask for just like 2 minutes?
Please.
Just wanted to also give you a update on the field turf replacement.
Oh, sure.
If you've been out or around the field, you've noticed that the grass has turned colors because it's been removed. So they started on Monday and they had probably 90% of the turf off the field and rolled up, ready to be picked up in semis and recycled.
Ready to be sold, right?
Correct. It's being,
As-
they're.
yeah.
As souvenirs?
As
No.
souvenirs.
Lance
They
really
did
wants
cut-
it.
they
I'll
did-
have
Yeah.
to.
They did, now I'm going over by 2 minutes, but it's not my fault. They did cut out the Greyhound, and we're gonna try to find a way that we can put it in LeVar's office. But,
A water
no, about 90% of the turf is actually rolled up, and it probably is completely gone by now. I was out there at like 8 o'clock this morning. No, I mean, but it's off the field. So next week we will have the grading done, and the shipment of the new turf will be coming in from the manufacturer. And they anticipate that, given good Wisconsin weather, we may have our field turf project completed by the end of June, which made the rec department very happy.
Have we thought any more about increased or improved signage for appropriate usage of the turf? I know I brought this up at the rec advisory meeting as they were talking about it, and I said it half jokingly, but not really knowing, because they had even more stories about things that had been done on the turf and track. So I am sort of curious if we've thought of that.
So at this point, no, we were just working on the turf replacement and making sure that the schedules, so, you know, if there's feedback or recommendations, those are things that we can pretty easily look
There's a
at.
dog park, please don't.
Is there a
Yeah.
list of things that you're not allowed to do on there?
Turf and.
I mean, I
Right.
know it seems
It's-
obvious, but
yeah, it's
I
apparently
think
a lot
the
of,
turf is a little more
enforcement.
flexible. It's not a dog park, but it's athletic turf. I think the biggest concern that I have as far as signage is the track. You know, we get people that ride bicycles on the track, and recreational walkers love the first 3 lanes, and they should really walk in the outside 3 lanes. Because everybody walking on the inside 3 lanes is going to cause the inside 3 lanes to deteriorate quicker than the remainder of the track. And so, you know, if we just put some signage over all that.
Just maybe appropriate,
Yeah.
just things to think about.
Addition to signage, I think I was talking to a parent who's a track person, and said there's things that like, something that can pop out on the curves that will prevent people physically from running or walking on those first 3 lanes. Forcing
Speed
people
bumps?
out. Not speed bumps, but something that like, there's a post, JD Opticar was telling me about this, there's, you know, like.
Like freeway closure things
Yeah.
that like go across.
And
Like
they
we
do
have-
hurdles though, so.
Steeplechase.
You have recreational hurdlers causing problems.
I had to call Tony last week because,
Okay.
I saw a guy on his road bike just going around, you know, 30 miles per hour, and I was stopping him.
is Tony the heavy on that?
Well, he asked me immediately, he's like, do you run this place? I said, no, but I'm gonna get the guy who does on the phone.
Oh.
And then Tony, I put him on speaker, and the guy got scared, and, I think he waited me out and may have gone back, but, you know, I found myself in this awkward position, to have to explain, like, yeah, there's no sign specifically about bikes, but, talking about possibly needing an ordinance of sorts, you know, so if that were to become, apparently it has been more of an issue.
I don't know about an ordinance, but yeah,
Well, I mean,
signage.
Well, in terms of
well,
calling
then
the
you could
police
get
and having
fines.
the police fine folks for abusing that.
Maybe.
We could have more
Maybe
discussion
start
when
with
it's on the
signs.
agenda, probably.
I
Right
don't
now,
know
it's
that-
not on the
Yeah,
agenda,
I
so.
can put it on.
Right.
One thing this does make me think about though is that's a very visible project. I know it's not part of the referendum, but I'm wondering if that might be something our communications people can be documenting some of these big projects.
We are.
Okay,
We're actually-
and then the roofs and, you know, some of the, as we get into the referendum, just, you know, making sure that that stuff's documented and and it can be on the website, can really communicate what's happening.
We're taking some drone footage and everything.
Oh, wow.
Oh, nice.
Before and after.
Cool.
Some process.
Very
Nice.
Hopefully,
Great.
we have some presentation.
Thank you.
So, thanks, Patrick, for everything.
All right, thanks.
Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you, Patrick.
Maybe we'll call you as a guest or
I'll
something.
come back
future
for a
meeting.
ribbon cutting.
Perfect.
Oh, perfect. All right, I will take a motion for the board consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. I don't even know if thank you is enough for the $800,000 donation from the Gross family, for the Gross Scholarship, and thank you for the $7,000 donation from the Orthopedic Hospital in support of Summer Sounds. Okay, public comments number 3. All right, review of to-do items. You want to try?
So we are tabled and we'll bring back the SEA ratification. So we'll bring that back at the next meeting. I think we had also talked about seeing if there's any college students that were back
Alumni.
for the summer, alumni student, to be able to talk at the at our student results section. So I'll check with Principal Kenny on the progress on that. Signage for the track, and then just following up on, probably Tony reinforced it, but just following up with the communications on the projects that we have going. So.
And the only one I have is to kind of connect with Amy and Brian on writing this either op-ed or letter that we want to kind of move forward on that. And then the others are future agenda items, I think. So that's the only one I have as a to-do. Anything else?
I'm throwing this out there, everybody. I don't know if you want to have a discussion about the conversion, the ban on conversion therapy in Shorewood to weigh in. I think just reading the Shorewood Ripples today and knowing that the discussion is happening with the village board, I wonder if we don't want to put out a statement in support or a resolution in support of such a ban.
I think, I've been approached by a few community members who've said, hey, the school board could make a statement at least on this. It's really a village issue in terms of passing an ordinance, but there's a place because it affects children primarily. There's a place for the school board.
The resolution?
Yeah.
Yeah, we could. So do you want to, Lance, help me draft something and
Yeah.
bring it to the next board meeting? When's their next meeting that they're bringing it to?
It seemed like from just watching the video of the village board meeting that it was a little more complicated in terms of enforcement. And I believe there was some conversation with the village attorney and I think a little more information that had to be obtained. So
You don't know?
just from watching the video, I don't know that
It's not
there was a
clear.
date when it was gonna be put back on the agenda, but I know they're anxious to.
We can ask her next week too.
Yeah.
By board meeting.
Yeah,
So-
so the question is it more effective we can do a resolution?
We can do a
before-
resolution before the
they vote
meeting,
on it,
yeah,
encourage
and then
them to
send it.
vote on it. They've done similar things in the past to support
Yep.
policies that we've passed, but after we passed, or you passed them. So we could do it either way, but I think if they're having an issue kind of getting it to a vote, it might be helpful to do it sooner.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't wanna give the impression that they're not anxious to get to a vote. think
No, I
there
know,
were
I
just
just didn't know, like,
Yeah,
if they
just
had
some,
picked a date,
some
yeah.
things that needed to be worked out.
And then other future agenda items, so, going back to the, conversation about the N-word, I guess one of the things I need to look up is, when is the code of conduct brought, like, it's not necessarily brought, well, I guess you could ask Tim, when is the code of conduct, like, reviewed again? I can't remember if it's every year?
So within our
Yeah, like within our reports.
Yeah, I mean, it would be annually.
OE10.
Yeah.
OE10 comes up in July,
Okay.
I believe.
So then
Right.
I'll look at that and see if there's, like, I guess we'll look at it there.
Yep,
And
that's
see
when
if
all,
there's-
that's when much of the discipline,
Okay.
and referral data comes forward.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And then the last thing on my future agenda item, so, good news, we got 11 applications for student reps.
Oh, great.
So my, I have them, I'm actually gonna ask Veda to make them electronic copies. But if you guys remember, instead of reference letters, we're gonna do reference checks. And so I'm gonna ask all of you to take 2 names and call their references. There's like a list of questions. Obviously you can ask more questions than that, but just at least ask those questions of them. I think we're kind of on probably a pretty tight timeline for this. We probably should, we said we would interview everyone. So now we have to figure out when we're gonna do 11 interviews. So I guess I'll work with Veda to set out some doodle polls around that, and then, kind of like, I think we would vote on the 2 that we wanna bring forward, either maybe by at least the July meeting, so. Questions? No. What I had said to Pablo is, and I'll let you guys see the names, is, maybe pick people that you don't, I mean, if you happen to know them, maybe pick people you don't know very well, so that you're not having any sort of, that's probably the hardest for Pablo, but, and you made me laugh too. But yeah, so that's exciting. So we'll get that on there. Okay.
This one?
Yeah.
Well, I know there was that email from Sue Kelly about the elder services
Oh, yeah.
report. Is that coming back
Yeah,
for a
it will be.
presentation?
She had to be out of town for a family emergency, so it'll be back.
Okay.
Yes, okay, and, yeah.
One other one, just looking back at old notes, I had written down that we were supposed to get a, grounds plan from a new horticulturist, in the spring, which is almost right. And so I just wondered if that can be on the schedule for.
Yeah, it's future agenda item, yeah.
Cool.
Do we have a new horticulturist?
Yes, yeah, he's been with us for a while, so,
Okay.
and he's got a crew, he's almost at full crew, full summer crew, so.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right, I can't believe that, it must be special for Pat's last meeting that we're done so early.
Oh, and
And
it should be the day
things
for
were
our
signed
last
for
day of
me?
school.
All right, we're in recess, thank you.
Thank you.